I have a confession to make. I have a complicated and slightly troubled relationship with the Israel Day Parade. And by that, there was a time in my life when I loathed going to the parade. I can't believe I'm admitting this with Rabbi Miller sitting right over there. Rabbi Miller doesn't know this, but 10 years ago when he asked me to put together a bus to go to the parade, I had this huge pit of despair in my stomach, and I forced a smile on my face and gulped down the emotion and said, "Sure, that sounds great. Can't wait to go." Now, some of you are waiting for the joke. There isn't one. Now, I can only see half of your faces, but from the look of the half I can see, this is probably a good time for me to preface that my distaste for the parade has absolutely nothing to do with Israel whatsoever. I'm sorry, I probably should have led with that. It has nothing to do with how I feel about Israel. On Rosh Hashanah, I had mentioned that I went to a Hebrew day school from 3rd through 8th grade. And one of the requirements of the school was marching in the Israel Day Parade. For weeks before the parade, we would help clear the tables from the cafeteria, and for hours we would practice marching, which for a 5th grader is really just practicing walking slowly. Oh, and we would also practice holding banners, which is really just the act of practicing not dropping something while walking slowly. Did I mention the school marched in matching outfits? No? So picture this, an entire school dressed up in matching outfits, uniforms, marching down 5th Avenue. What kid wouldn't find that cool? All in all, not really that harmful. The first year it was cool, but it all changed the next year. That year I had an issue with everything. Let's begin with the design of the outfits. Our Israeli Hebrew teacher, and because it's Kol Nidre, and I don't want to be accused of Lashon Hara, I'll just call her Mora Yehudit. She designed our outfits. You're going to hear her name a lot. She went with a nice theme of Jerusalem. The imagery was based on a song you all know, Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, gold. So she decided we would do gold lettering and imagery on the shirts and the hats. And what goes well with gold, you might ask? She decided it was black. So there we were in the heavy heat wave of June, in high 90s, dressed all in black with long, heavy shirts, long black pants, and those thick, heavy baseball caps from the 80s. Not the trucker caps that are breathable, but the heavy wool hats. I wish I had a shirt left to show you. I think I threw them out the moment I got home. We sat there on the hot sidewalk, dripping with sweat, waiting for hours until we could begin marching. The way I remember it, whether true or not, my mom will tell you later, was that we could not leave to get water, and we weren't allowed to go to the bathroom, mainly because the school was afraid parents wouldn't bring their kids back. We were tired and exhausted, and we hadn't moved yet. And when we did, Mora Yehudit, whom I'm pretty sure was an Israeli drill sergeant, yelled at all of us if we weren't in perfect formation in our support of Israel. And if we didn't show up, we were told that we would be marked as absent for the day, and that it would, oh God, follow us around forever on our permanent record. How could I ever expect to get into a college if I didn't march in the parade? My greatest joy in graduating was knowing that I would never, ever have to march in that parade again. So when Rabbi Miller said, "Oh, by the way, Anshe Emeth is going on the Israeli Day Parade with Artza, and I would like you to organize the trip," I just swallowed and went, "Sure, that sounds lovely." Again, I really do want to stress that it has nothing to do with Israel and had more to do with memories I had forgotten, I had repressed. In truth, back at Hillel Academy, I didn't really understand what the big deal was with Israel. No one bothered to explain it to me. Sure, there was this great sense of Israeli pride, and there were flags, and there were maps, and more Yehudit fought in the Yom Kippur War and told us stories of what it was like, probably more graphic than a third grader should hear. And those victories were proud, recent memories. And the term settlements, to us, wasn't even a thing yet. If I said the phrase Israeli settlements to anyone at school, they would have thought I had forgotten what a kibbutz was supposed to be called. Whenever there was a peace signing, we would all be pulled out of class to watch it, 300 of us in a big auditorium trying to make out what was happening on one of those 30-inch TVs that was strapped to that big cart on wheels. But we weren't given any context for why Israel was important. Just look and watch, isn't it amazing? Well, at least we weren't in math class. But back then, there really wasn't any debate about Israel. If anything, Israel was a unifying topic. That's not the same today. A lot of Jews aren't quite sure how they feel about Israel. Back in the 80s and 90s, the parade was filled. It took us hours before it was even our turn to march. The last couple of times we as a synagogue went, I don't think we waited even more than 45 minutes, no matter where we were in line. Less and less people are showing up for it. As Gary Rosenblatt of the Jewish Week pointed out, the fact is that the great majority of New York Jewry is nowhere to be found on the one day of the year we celebrate Israel together. Perhaps it tells us more than we care to know about the engaged pro-Israel community of New York when we look up and down Fifth Avenue and note the disproportionate involvement of modern Orthodox Jewry and core activists, and wonder about the level of participation or lack thereof of the great majority of New York Jews. Is this a microcosm of the American-Jewish relationship with Israel going forward? Why is it more Jews don't go to the parade? They couldn't have all had more Yehudit, right? It's complicated. But I think that some of it is in how we define what Zionism is. For example, many often equate being a Zionist with how they feel about the policies and practices of the Israeli government. And therefore, being a Zionist means unwavering support and loyalty to the Israeli government, no matter what it does. To me, that conflates Zionism with Israelism. Zionism and Israelism are two very different things. By the way, the state that many may be supporting might be a state that doesn't exist or that they've never even visited. As Dr. Jonathan Sarna puts it, the Zion of American Jewish imagination has become something of a fantasy land, a seductive heaven on earth where enemies are vanquished, guilt assuaged, hopes realized, and deeply felt longings satisfied. American Jewish images of Zion were developed from the needs of American Jewry and were, as a result, increasingly out of touch with reality back in Eretz Yisrael. And over time, this Israel of American Jews became more and more of an idealized dream world. Therefore, many American Jews fell in love with a mythical Israel. Connections like these are largely emotional, not ideological. Therefore, this type of Jewish support for Israel is more accurately described as Israelism rather than Zionism. And as Shaul Magid writes, many American Jews who identify as Zionists today actually know very little about Zionism. That is, they know little about the complex, self-critical, and often messy history of Zionism, an ideology that has been at war for itself for most of its history. Their Zionism is arguably pro-Israelism, the advocacy of a nation-state and its policies against its critics at all cost. Currently, fewer American Jews are now willing to provide blanket support for Israeli policies and actions. and many now express their support for Israel by opposing and even lobbying against the policies of the Israeli government. Unfortunately, I believe our question of do you connect with or support Israel really has become a referendum on how you feel about the government of Israel, and typically has nothing to do with the people, the culture, the community, or the soul of Israel. For me, Zionism does not mean carte blanche support for the actions of the Israeli government. Rather, Zionism means genuine support for Israel by encouraging its continued growth and caring about Israelis. Also, conversations about Israel should not be synonymous with conversations about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I know the conflict is the elephant in the room, but Israel is more than just the conflict. Synagogues all over America now refrain from speaking about Israel in general because of the growing incivility and intolerance that frequently accompanies debate over the conflict. The conflict takes over every conversation, and the debate has become so nasty that a moratorium on talking about Israel has effectively occurred all over this country. As an aside, I think that it is important for the organized Jewish community to allow debate and dissent in order to retain and attract young American Jews. Whether or not we discuss it, the debate and the dissent exist and isn't going away. Censorship will not put the genie back in the bottle. But just like Israelism has created an imaginary Israel to love, this anti-Israelism has also created an imaginary Israel to hate. Zionism to me is neither of these two extremes. Zionism is Ahavat Yisrael, love for the people of Israel. Now, does that mean that every Jew needs to be a Zionist? No. I don't believe that being a Zionist is intrinsic to one's Jewishness. You can have a perfectly fine Jewish identity that has nothing to do with Israel. I did, until I went to live there. It wasn't until I moved to Israel and spent time really diving into the question of Jewish peoplehood and what does Jewish peoplehood truly mean to me that I discovered the miracle of Israel. I was incredibly engaged Jewish youth. But nowhere in this American Jewish identity was the state of Israel. Because whenever I asked someone why Israel was important to them, I was treated like the wicked child at the Passover Seder, asking, what does this holiday mean to you? I wasn't challenging the system. I wanted to understand how others felt so I could attempt to formulate it for myself. It wasn't until my first year of rabbinical school, when students are mandated to spend the year living in Israel, that I first stepped foot into the country. Every thought I had about Israel came from a place of absence, of distance, of secondary or tertiary sources. When I got off the plane, I was almost expecting to find people doing Israeli folk dancing through the airport to get to the luggage claim, or deli kiosks at every corner. What I found was not an Israel that I was taught in school. In school, they successfully taught a myth, and myths rarely hold up to the truth. We weren't taught why Israel mattered, just that it did. We weren't given the proper tools to understand the conflict, so many of us just wondered, does Israel matter? And many, unfortunately, answered no. But Israel does matter. It matters because it's a vital aspect of the collective of Jewish life, and that is regardless of political or religious orientation. If one cares about preserving and building a sense of mutual responsibility and connection among Klal Yisrael, amongst the entire Jewish people, then Israel is a vital component of how to foster and sustain those connections. I believe that Israel is a major resource for Jewish life, yet unlike the classic Zionism of Israel's founders, I do not regard Israel as the center of Jewish life, but rather a center of Jewish life, a center of Jewish life that every Jew should visit. Jewish life can exist without Israel. However, it would be poorer because of that absence. The same is true for Jewish life in Israel when it comes to the diaspora. The existence of each other strengthens the other, but only if we engage with each other. That's why programs like the URJ's Heller High are so vitally important. There's no better way of teaching the youth why Israel is important and about why Jewish peoplehood is important than sending them on a substantive, prolonged program to Israel where they encounter a real Israel. Hannah's going when she's in 11th grade, right, Hannah? You say yes now. Yes, good. The Jewish people, sorry, I just committed you, Larry. Jewish peoplehood is all about how we connect with one another. There are thriving Jewish centers all over the world. Each Jewish site serves as a vital resource for enabling a Judaism capable of thriving in contemporary society. When we are concerned with the relationship of those communities to one another, Jewish peoplehood remains an ongoing vital reality, and Israel can serve as the hub to that intricate web of connection. That's Klal Yisrael. You see, the reason why I didn't think Israel mattered for my Jewish identity was because I had fallen into a major and common misconception about Israel. I believed that it was all about me and what I got out of it. If it doesn't mean anything to me, then it doesn't mean anything at all. I didn't get Jewish peoplehood. Additionally, I didn't realize that diaspora Jewry is just as important for Israel as Israel is for the diaspora. A common phrase that I hear when speaking with Israelis who come to work at the various Jewish sleepaway camps is that I left Israel an Israeli, but I'm returning a Jew. That being here and engaging with American Jewry has given them new lenses in which to view themselves and Judaism, and has helped build a blossoming religious and non-Orthodox presence in Israel. And living in Israel for the year fostered a love for the land and people and changed how I view Israel. While I view America, as many of you do, I guess, as my physical homeland, I see Israel now as my spiritual homeland, something I didn't really understand until I went there. While living in Israel, I felt as though I had a spiritual reawakening, engaging with our people's history, seeing where it all began. Being there made me feel closer to God and my spiritual self than I ever had before. It intensified those connections, and it connected me with Jews all over the world. That melting pot where you just bump into everybody and see Jews from all over coming together in that one place. And I came back to the States with those feelings in tow. If you need to, you should see this whole sermon as a well-placed ad for our congregational trip to Israel. A true Zionism is developed when we encounter the people of Yisrael. When we start with Ahavat Yisrael, Zionism has something to stand on. There is more to Israel than the conflict, and there is no moment more important than now to visit, especially at Israel's 75th anniversary. If you've never been, let's go. If you've been before, let's go again. Rabbi Miller and I can't wait. We are chomping at the bit, and it looks like we're going to have 2 full buses. After the break fast tomorrow, go online, register, or call the offices on Thursday and ask for help in registering. Oh, and don't forget to join us for the Israel Day Parade this June. Even I'm going to be there, because it's not about me. I want us to make a statement about how the Reform movement cares about Israel and Israelis. We cannot be absent for this year's parade. I've been following a theme over these past few sermons. This year's theme, which I hope you've noticed by now, is about how we come together. For various issues, I brought up how we as Jews, as Americans, as citizens of the world, only become more enriched when we come together and don't exclude others from our world. Tonight, I invite you to not exclude dialogue that brings us closer together, but I also invite you to connect with a part of your Jewish identity that we as Americans all over are starting to stray from. I hope the year ahead will be a year of coming together for all of us, all over the world.